And I'm like, when you show it for people because you want to, not because you have to, that's when people are inspired to go sell on your behalf. Like if I wanted to get Cameron Harold, who's written 5 books, coaches CEOs all over the world, as a sales rep, if I paid him $2 million, he would say no. He'd say, I don't have time for that. Because I loved on him, I inspired him to be a sales rep with no commission. And I did the math years ago. People are like, 25 grand, that's a lot. I'm like, it's produced multi-7 figures. So even at 7 figures, 25 grand to make $1 million, I'm just this farm kid. But to me, that's a 50x, what I call return on, I don't care what your ROI is. What's return on relationship? ROR will eat ROI all day long. Because when you pour into a relationship, like there's no Facebook algorithm that's going to get a better return than pouring into people.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast. You've got Shawn and Lacey here, and we have a super special guest, a very special guest, because this guest we've been trying to connect forever. We did it once many months ago.
It went sideways, as we said.
It got all screwed up really bad. So here we are again, putting this all together right now to bring to you the king of gifting, Giftology, John Ruhlin. And I'm super excited to dive into all of the tricks and the tips and all of the things that we can do better as human beings. This is not just about business. This is about being a human and how we can show others that we care. Now, as in the business side, of course, you get loyalty, you get repeat business, you get relational capital. But on the human side, you get human connection. And for me, that's what this is really all about. So I'm super excited. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is a long time coming. I think even summer camp was 4 years in the making. So, I mean, we play the long game. We both do.
Yeah, and then we both said that. We value long-term relationships.
This is definitely that.
And this is definitely that.
So we're good.
By the time we see you in person, we will have already had a long-term relationship.
Amen. Amen to that.
I want to dive into this, of course. I mean, you've done thousands of interviews, this idea of giftology. Let's get the sort of the formalities out of the way for the viewers and the listeners. Tell us about the concept of giftology, and then we'll just dive in and we'll see if we could take it into areas that you haven't normally gone in your previous interviews.
I have a funny feeling that's going to happen, which I love. So what I would say is when people hear gifting in business, a lot of people have a tendency to want to check out and be like, I don't care about gifts. It's not my love language. Who cares about gifts? Like, it's not like, isn't that something you do at Christmas time? So the core of our message really isn't gifting. The gift itself, a physical gift, is a delivery vehicle for emotion to relationships. And we all know that like how we show up for people determines whether or not people feel valued, appreciated, and whether it's your marriage or whether it's your brother, sister, client, center of influence, investor, they're all just human beings. And a gift really just communicates, I care about you, I know you, I see you, I value you. Because everybody says they love somebody, everybody says that they value somebody, but show me your checkbook and show me your schedule and I'll tell you what your priorities are and whether or not you put your money and your time where your mouth is. So the core of giftology is really that there's a formula, there's a system, there's a recipe that this crazy country boy who was milking goats on a farm figured out because I started to see very successful people that were rainmakers, and they weren't about the dog and pony show of like give to get or like bribe people. They were really about showing up for people. And I saw that as a 20-year-old, and I realized nobody was teaching this. People teach sales and leadership. If every business rises and falls on relationships and you don't have a relationship plan, then you're going to lose to somebody that does. And so that's the core of what giftology is all about.
Yeah, I think it's great. And when I was, looking through all of your stuff on your website, the thing that really stuck out to me was this idea of, I think you said, it says leveraging gratitude. And I love that because I think for creating, like we talk about long-term relationships, you have to do it in a way that's authentic, that speaks to the individual, that's customized and tailored for them so that they feel special. And by doing that, you're really showing them gratitude. And I just thought that was a really neat concept. And so how did that piece evolve for you throughout your stories, understanding how to tap into that with other individuals?
Well, I think that, everybody wants to grow their company, right? Whether it's with clients or grow, like if you're a VC backed firm, you want to grow your investment or you want to, increase your retention. All these different things are just, engaging human beings in a way that psychologically makes them want to do something. Like it's not a bad thing to want somebody to refer business or to stay with you or to be loyal. And I think that most people have become very tactical with things. They say they're playing the long game, but most of the things are like, if you do this for me, here's your gift card. Well, that's not a gift. That's a carrot and stick method. And I started to see that what people thought was gratitude really wasn't gratitude. It was an incentive or it was a promotional product. Those aren't gifts. And so over the last, I'm 41, I just turned 41. We've been doing this for 21 years. Initially, it started out with just like, hey, we interned with a company, Cutco. I wanted to sell a bunch of knives. I pitched my girlfriend's dad these Cutco knives, and he was an attorney. He was a rainmaking attorney. And I thought, well, he's always giving things away. He'd find like a deal on noodles, and everybody at church the next Sunday, like 300 people would walk away with like a year's supply of noodles. And I was like, Paul, like that's 40 grand. Like, why would you do that? And he's like, I just like showing up for people. I just love the smiles on their faces. So I saw him doing it as a true long game. Most people say they're playing the long game, but their long game is days. The long game is decades. And Paul was my first mentor who really showed me, like, you do things no strings attached. And so what most people think of as gratitude or appreciation or gifting really isn't any of those things. And it's definitely not leverage. It's not hard to gift one person. Like your spouse, people will come to me and like, John, it's my 50th anniversary. My wife, I need help. And I'm like, you're screwed. Like you should have been listening the last 50 years. Like anybody can be a great gift giver. Like literally, like it's not difficult. If a farm boy who was like milking goats, who was hoeing, I grew up on 47 acres in a town of 317 people. It's intentionality, it's focus. I tell people like spend half as much time as you spend on your fantasy football league on your relationship, and it'll probably do better. It'll thrive. Like you can be a good gift giver, but if you want to do something for your top 100 relationships, your top 25, like scaling gratitude or scaling thoughtfulness is hard. Because now you're like not just doing it for one person, you're doing it for all your employees. You're doing it for your centers of influence. You're doing it for your mentors, your investors. All of a sudden, even a small business that's doing $3 million in revenue, they might add up all of the people that have helped them get to where they're at and be like, holy crap, there's 172 people on this list. How do you leverage gratitude and not make it feel like, hey, here's a jacket with my logo on it. Here's an Amazon gift card. Here's a case of wine. That doesn't communicate you're special. That communicates I had to check the box at Christmas because you didn't, like there's a formula, and even the timing of what you send, like people are like, John, I want to send anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas gifts. I'm like, we do no ABC gifting. And they're shocked. They're like, what are you talking about? Like I'm like, are you like, do you want to do a gift out of obligation and expectation? Or do you want to do a gift to show up as a surprise and delight? Like we all have heard the Ritz-Carlton surprise and delight, but most people give gifts on Valentine's Day for their wife. Do you earn brownie points showing up with roses on Valentine's Day? No, that's table stakes. You show up for your wife, your husband, your client on a random Tuesday, not asking for a referral, not asking for anything. You're saying, I appreciate the relationship just because, whether it's your wife or your client, now people are like, I didn't do anything. What do you like? Now it has 100 times more impact because of the timing in the messaging. So people say, John, I did Giftology. I've done this before. I spent 50 grand on promo products. It didn't work. I'm like, did you follow the recipe? And they're like, well, we did Giftology-ish. And I'm like, imagine if you bake bread 100,000 times, but every time you don't put yeast in. Guess what you don't get? You don't get bread. I don't care how many times you do it. The little things of relationships dictate whether or not you get that leverageability and it lands as gratitude or it lands as manipulation. And most people are actually spending money, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. The industry as a whole is multi-billion-dollar. They're spending money to annoy, frustrate, guilt, or piss off their most valuable relationships. it's not a good investment.
Huh.
Most of our clients, our members, the people that we talk to agree with the concept. I think in general, everybody's like, I get it. We need to invest in our relationships.
Right.
Most of our clients, our members, people that we talk to, don't do it. So it's like, this is this thing that's like, okay, so I agree in principle, but for whatever reason, there's a gap between I agree and I'm executing.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, because if not, then, you know, the success of your company, the success of the book, it wasn't like you read it and you're like, duh. It's like, oh, this is innovative. And then with all respect, of course, it's not that innovative. It's
no, I didn't invent it.
What is the gap? Walk us through. Let's say that I say I agree in principle. I don't really have my relationships. I always talk about this myself. I say, you know, in my mind, relational capital is your greatest asset. I always say, if you took everything away from me, you could take all of my money, you could take everything away, I could lose everything as long as I still had my phone. If I had my phone, I'm back in business, right? Because I could have my relationships and I can get going.
Yep.
But let's say, so I always tell people, you have to put your relationships somewhere. You put your money in a bank, right? We have to keep track of our relationships. If you were talking to somebody that was like, okay, John, I'm in, but I don't even know where to start. Get us going. How do we get going on the path? Not even talking about the formula. I'm talking about pre-formula. I'm talking about, I don't even know what to do first, because that's where I think most people are. What would your advice be?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, you know, most people know that they should eat well, and well is a relative term, but they don't do it because they don't have a plan they don't have a diet. They don't know, like right now I'm in the middle of 75 hard. And I was already in the best shape of my life, but I was like, I want to take it up a notch. And like 75 hard gives you a framework, right? It gives you like, here's the 8 things you have to do every single day. And if you don't do it, you go back to, you know, I'm on day 23. If I don't do it today, like I go back to 0. So there's accountability, there's framework. Most people, I think there's a misunderstanding of what it means to invest in a relationship. First off, most people will say, you know, my company's growing, I need to hire 2 people. We're growing like crazy. They'll hire those 2 people. They'll make the decision in 5 minutes. They'll add 100 grand, 150 grand, 200 grand in fixed labor and overhead to that cost of their company, even as a small business, and never think anything of it. And then I'll ask them, why would you not invest that same $100,000 into your top 20 relationships that allow you to even have a business? And they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. They'll spend 100 grand over here one way. Over here, they're asking for, I want the metrics. What am I going to get? And so they don't understand what they really should be investing. They don't have a framework and a plan to say, oh my gosh, like this is important. And I don't think that anybody ever gets the honest accountability and feedback saying, you did the bottles of wine, or you sent me Amazon gift cards, or you gave me a cash bonus, or whatever the things are. And in a lot of those cases, they're taken for granted. They're table stakes. They're viewed as a promotional product. So I don't think there's really, because it feels awkward. If you write a note and say, I thought less of you as a human when I got your jacket or a polo shirt with a logo the size of a softball on it, feels mean, it feels rude. So people just kind of like placate each other and say, thank you, but they don't really mean it. It's not hitting their heart level. So I think that there's a misunderstanding. I think that there's fear for most leaders. Like they're like, oh my gosh, if I do this wrong, I could like upset the relationship. What if it's viewed as a bribe? What if they don't like it? You know, I send wine and their dad's an alcoholic. There's all of this risk involved. I don't think people are budgeting properly for it and realizing this is a real leverage tool where you could put $1 in. And literally we have clients that are getting $100 back out. I think they think it's a check the box, like I have to do gratitude and appreciation at Christmas, or it's our 20th anniversary of our business. We got to send something out. Like nobody cares about your 20th anniversary. They care about themselves. Like, so I think that the part of the gap is fear. I think it's ignorance. And I think that most people haven't literally like listed out and said, here's all of my relationships internally and externally in the business. And here's the value of them if they went away. Most people have not really put a value to saying, if this client goes away, if this mentor wasn't in my corner, what would that cost me? What's their advice worth? What's the relationship with the bank? Or like I send nicer gifts to my suppliers that I spend millions of dollars with than most people send to their best clients. And the reason is most businesses don't have a business without their suppliers. And yet they treat them like dog crap. So I think that trying to give somebody a framework and understanding, and it's even like, like I love the 5-minute journal from a gratitude perspective, because if you wrote down 3 people every single day for a year that you were grateful for, you'd have a list of 1,000 people at the end of the year. Now all of a sudden, and then if you started to put values beside them, now all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, like I should be investing not $2,000 on peanut brittle at Christmas. I should be investing 200 grand, and it still wouldn't be enough in these relationships because I wouldn't have my $5 million company without them. And so to give you guys, like your tribe, kind of a framework of what we charge tens of thousands of dollars to like take the Cubs through this, or Google or anybody else, your tribe can go to giftologysystem.com and get our framework of like, I don't care what the gift is. That's the 7th step in the process. Who are you needing to take care of? What's important to them? Like, how frequently should you be loving on them? Like, all of those simple questions to build out like your relationship plan are right there. And they can take our entire playbook and go do it. Now, what's funny is people go and try to steal the recipe and the formula, and they realize if they try to do it for one person, it's not hard. But to try to execute the logistics for 100 people or 50 people or 25 people or 2,500 people, that's our secret sauce. That's why people hire our firm, is not for the formula. That formula's free. It's the execution of actually doing it. And that's where people hit the gap and they're like, holy crap, to handwrite 150 notes is hard. For that many people. To drop ship to somebody's home address is hard. To personalize it is hard. It's not hard to understand the formula. It's hard to execute the logistics of doing that at scale. That's the difficult part.
Well, let's walk through. I want to walk through your thought process, and I want to stay still in the very fundamentals, the basics. I want to use your system to grow my relationships. Let's say that I have very few relationships. Let's say that I know Lacey and I know you. So, I mean, I've got 2 good ones, and I'm going to use a hypothetical because I don't think he would mind. And let's say, for the sake of the discussion, that I wanted to be in relationship with Tucker Max. Maybe I wanted to write a book. I realized that you were greatly benefited by your relationship with him. And I'm like, yep. I wish I could be in relationship with Tucker. Tell me your advice. What do I need to do now that I've identified the person? But what do I just start sending Tucker things in the mail?
Yeah, well, I know Tucker, and I think you know Tucker. Like Tucker can buy whatever he wants. And I think that's the case of most people in business. Most of the people that people are trying to influence are making high 5 figures, 6, 7, 8 figures, 9 figures, whatever. Like, you're not going to buy something for somebody that they can't buy for themselves. Mm-hmm. It's not a cash problem, but people will use that as an excuse and be like, well, I can't spend it, so I won't do it. Or it's the thought that counts. And I'm like, that's such crap. That's an excuse to give a lame gift. It's not the thought that counts. It's the thoughtful thought that counts. And Tucker is somebody who, like, dude, he's tough. He's hard-nosed, but he's also like really thoughtful and really like intelligent and really like dialed in on details. And so what I would say with somebody like Tucker is understanding the person and realizing you can influence Tucker or any other person because they're a human being. Whether they're like, we have clients that are taking care of billionaires and making billionaires cry with with Giftology. And it's not about the expense, although like it's not typically a $2 thing, but it's also not a $2 million thing either. Like they can buy their own $2 million thing if they're a billionaire. It's like, so I think if you're trying to take care of Tucker, it's understanding what makes him tick. In almost every Tucker of the world has an inner circle. They have family. Tucker's married. His wife's Veronica. What does Veronica do? Well, she's a doctor. Do they have kids? Yes, they have kids. Well, when I'm engaging in a plan, whether it's for one person or 2,000, a lot of those people have an inner circle. They have a spouse or a significant other. They have kids. They have pets. And they have a team, assistant, videographer, a chief of staff, an event planner, all the different people around the people. And so many people in business, they're like, hey, these 500 people won a sales award. They take care of the sales leader. I'm like, spend 80% of your money, not just taking them on a trip to Mexico for $5 grand. What if you spent $5 grand as well on their family? on their spouse who had to deal with the overtime or the travel or the late nights getting home from work, or the kids who are dealing with their parents being gone or stressed out or whatever else. So when we're laying out a plan for somebody like Tucker, it's like, to get Tucker's attention is difficult. To get him, like, you know, like he's into jujitsu and fighting and whatever else, like I had to spend a lot of money on his hobby to get his attention. But if I can do something that includes Veronica, if I can do something that includes his kids, if I can do something that includes his team, the way I win Tucker is by winning the people around him. Because if he's the hero to the people around him, then he loves the person who made him the hero to that person. And I've had this happen so many times where, like, I wanted to get one of the top financial advising coaching company CEOs in the world on as a client. He met me at this $25,000 mastermind. And his response when I told him what giftology was, he's like, "Oh, that's cute. That would never work in my industry." He's like, "All my guys are 7, 8-figure earners. I've been in private equity." He's like, "That's cool, but I take my clients on safaris and Napa, and I spend 10 grand a person or 20 grand a person on these trips. But gifting, no thanks." So I started to send him gifts afterwards. I'm like, I'm going to play my own game. I started to send him gifts, but they weren't focused on John. They were focused on his wife, Jan. 6 months later, John reaches out, says, "John." I said, "Hey, John, what's going on?" I played dumb. He's like, "You started sending me these gifts after we met, and I thought your thing was like cute, but not for me." And he's like, 3 months ago, my wife, Jan, we're getting ready to go to bed. And she's like, "Hey, have you done anything with John Ruhlin lately?" And he's like, "I thought it was kind of weird." And then a week later, she brings your name up again. He's like, "I feel like I'm sleeping with your sales rep. Like, my wife, Jan, like, I can't believe that what you're sending is influencing her to ask about you multiple times. Like, this is weird. Will this work in my industry?" And I said, "Are there human beings in your industry?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Well, then it'll work." He fought me on the recipe. He's like, "I don't want to include their spouse. I don't know their spouse's name." Because it was a middle-aged married white dude club. I'm like, if you don't take care of the spouse, if you don't follow the program, the recipe, I won't work with you. And he fought me every step of the way. Here's the clutch. Here's the key. After his event, we did this gift as a pre-experience. He asked for referrals, which I don't recommend doing. You don't give a gift and then ask for referrals. I think that's dumb. That's a manipulation. That's a bait and switch. But he did it subtly on a survey. If he got 5% more referrals, he would have been elated. He's like, "John, my referrals, I checked it 3 times just to make sure because it's been crazy." He said they went up 107% over our best year ever. And the only thing we did differently were your stupid gifts.
Cute gifts, cute gifts.
Yeah, you're cute. You're cute gifts. I was like, he's like, "Why did it work?" And I was like, "Because you tapped into the relationship, whether it's Tucker, like Tucker loves to refer business. Like, and actually, like guys like him, like one of your gifts can be referrals. But most people suck so bad at the physical, tangible gift. A lot of people are good at taking people on trips. A lot of people are good at opening doors for people. Most people think they're a 7 out of 10 on tangible physical gifts, what we do. And really, they're a -3. They suck so bad at it, but they've never got honest feedback. And so they don't even realize that they're not good at it. They don't even realize that they're damaging relationships. And so the reason what we do works is because everything else is very cluttered. We're in the blue ocean. Most people aren't very good at it. And so if you can take an area that's most people suck at and get really good at it, now all of a sudden you're playing at a whole nother, like people are like, how are they crushing it? It's like, well, they're playing in a different world using a different tool that most people aren't even aware of.
It's really interesting because it makes me think about the 5 love languages and, gifts being one of them. And people are like, "Oh, I don't care about gifts." They say that all the time. "Oh, I don't like getting gifts." But what I'm realizing just listening to you, it's not that they don't like getting gifts. They've just never gotten the right ones.
Yeah, 1,000. Like most people don't like getting sucky gifts that make them feel good.
Right. And you're right. There's no feedback. So
there's no feedback loop. The feedback loop is fake because it feels rude. Like nobody wants a sucky. Like most people in America don't need more stuff.
Right.
Like, think about during the stupid pandemic, people are like, time on their hands, so they clean out their house. Goodwill had a line a mile long. Why? Because people were like, "I don't need all this crap."
Right.
And most of the stuff that people gives out has a logo on it. If it has a logo on it, it's not a gift. It's a promotional item. I don't care if it's a Rolex. You give somebody a Rolex with like Domino's did this. They gave their franchisees Rolexes. Guess what happened? Pawn shops started getting them as trade-ins. Because even on an Air King, white face, do you want even if you work for Domino's, do you really want to look at Domino's on your Rolex? No. So people think that they're doing giftology, but they're not. And so they've gotten sucky gifts. They've gotten, like, to put a logo on something means you're going to go force them to advertise for you. That feels manipulative. It feels gross. It feels icky. Like, you'd never go to a wedding. Anybody on the planet would never go to a wedding and on the beautiful Tiffany's vase, you know, compliments of Keller Williams. That's the gross, like, that'd be the tackiest thing in the world. But we do that in business, calling it gifting, and it's not. It's manipulation. It's a promotional item. There's nothing wrong with promotional items, but don't try to disguise it as a gift. And especially when you're dealing with affluent people that are 6 figures or higher, even 5 figures. Like, your employee, you give them a Lululemon jacket, but it has a logo on it. It's cool, but it's a uniform. It's not a gift. And so I think that there's a misunderstanding of what a gift really is. Mm-hmm. And when you get, and like, even like my love language is not gifting. That's the ironic part. You know, Gary Chapman is actually a client and a mentor of mine. And like, my love language is words of affirmation. I'm an introvert, and I'm like, I grew up on a farm. Like, I hated public speaking, ironically enough. God literally, like, has a sense of humor, because I would avoid speaking like the plague. I'd speak one time a year for Cutco at their big annual conference with thousands of people, and I would have diarrhea for 3 months leading up to the speaking gig. That's how nervous I was. And then, like, God really, like, literally, like, I was on a golf course in Chicago 14 years ago with my business partner, and this guy who didn't know me said, "John, God's telling me," I've never had any prophecy, like, that seems kind of like a little outside my comfort zone of my faith. So literally said, "John, you're going to speak on the biggest stages in the world." And my business partner laughed. He was like, "He hates speaking. That's never going to happen." And you know, God's got a sense of humor. It's coming true. But what I would say is that the 5 love languages, they're all just love. Whether it's words of affirmation, whether it's quality time, they're all, like, we all can receive and appreciate all of them. We just tend to appreciate some of them higher based upon how God's wired us. But what's interesting is, in business, if you can take a physical gift and put a handwritten note with it, that's the words of affirmation and context. In fact, the note that goes with the gift is just as important as what you're giving. Even if you're giving a Rolex, if you don't put the right note with it, it won't land at an emotional level. The words of affirmation matter. When you go spend quality time with somebody, give them the gift, handwritten note. Now you're spending quality time. Give them a big hug. Like, you can start, what's cool about this in business is if you can start to overlap different elements of it at times, you get this multiplication effect. And like, where somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, every time I think about that trip to Napa, I think about this, that the artifact reminds me." It's like why the Rolex is so cool is every time somebody looks down at their wrist, they subconsciously will think about who gave them the watch. Now, a lot of people just buy the watch for themselves, but if you were the one that gave that to them, you don't have to put your logo on it for them to remember where it came from. So the 5 love languages are a beautiful thing. I'm actually trying to talk Gary Chapman into writing the 5 love languages for business, because he has one for employees, but I think that the 5 love languages should be applied to all relationships in business, because it's the next evolution of what we're teaching from a relationship building perspective.
That's neat.
So much to unpack right there. I want to just touch on, because you said it briefly, but I want to make sure people understand nothing wrong with promotional items.
I know, I feel called out.
So then the question is, when is it appropriate to use promotional items, and when is it? We've talked about when it's not appropriate, when it's disguised as a gift. When would I use promotional items?
Well, I think that if you do relationship building really well on the experiential side, you do the people are like, "What's better, an experience or a gift?" And I'm like, both. It's not one or the other. It's not. But if you are going to do an experience, make it a once in a lifetime. Like, don't just take somebody to Morton's and call that, like, that's not once in a lifetime. People go to Morton's 50 times a year. If you're going on a trip, you know, take a smaller group of people to Napa and then fly in the top master sommelier to, like, coordinate and pour into the people. Like, create once in a lifetime experiences. Same with gifts. Don't just send something out, you know, to 1,000 people that feels like, you know, here's a koozie or a cooler or whatever. Like, go to 100 people and go all in. Where I think promotional products are fine is when you're dealing with more of the retail public, you know, at an event. Like, if you want to be the Cubs and you want to put your logo on a t-shirt and give it out to 10,000 people, that's fine. That's cool. Some people love it, but at least make the t-shirt something that people like to fit, doesn't feel like cardboard. Like at least make it best in class, make it feel, like classy. I think a lot of people, even on their promotional items, they cut corners and they don't realize the person's not going to end up using it. I think that where promotional items make sense specifically is where the logo with like the Cubs, or if you're in a special group, like maybe Black Diamond, it might make sense because people will value the logo that's on it, and it actually raises the value of the item because it's exclusive, it's different, it's special. Like if you went to Harvard, you care about the Harvard logo and you're okay with that being on something because you associate and identify with it. But even there, like when you're dealing with like the billionaires of the world, the logos probably needs to be small, tone on the shoulder, on the back. It needs to be subtle and classy. So I think there's a way to do promotional products where it actually adds value. Like the Cubs are one client that we'll allow to put their logo on it, but we'll tell them, put it as small as possible on the back. People don't need it screaming in their face. Do it subtly. And if you are going to do it as a company, let's say you're Ernst & Young, like if you want to have a giveaway at your conference, that's fine. But do a best-in-class journal. Don't do the one from China for $3. Do the one made in the US for $30. And put your logo subtly on there as a group thing. Maybe put the person's name on it so it's at least personal to the person. But understand that a promotional item is going to be viewed as more of like this is part of like the conference experience. This is a part of like the group, the club, the event. Don't let somebody talk you into like that's the gift. That's not a gift. That's a promotional item, and it's fine. Like if something's done in a world-class way, subtly with the logo, given at a conference or an event or whatever else, maybe 80% of the people will consider using it in the future, but they're not going to be emotionally charged to it the same way that they are a gift. So I think that there are times when you can do it in a thoughtful way as a part of an experience or a part of an event, but don't blow your budget on giving 500 backpacks at an event and then not have anything left after the event or after the conference or after the mastermind, like to send out to somebody. Even if you're sending the same thing to 200 people, it should feel like they're the only ones that are receiving it. And oftentimes like taking that gift and sending it at a different time, not at the event itself. When something arrives to you with a handwritten note to your family, it feels different than something showing up and you see everybody getting the same 1,000 thing in the audience. Because mentally, subconsciously, we all want to feel special. We all want to be treated differently. And so that's, for us, when we're kind of laying out a strategy, that's how we kind of think about, promotional products versus gifts. And we don't do promotional products. We'll refer people out to people that do that. But there are times and places for it, but it still needs to be done with thoughtfulness and intentionality versus just, what do we have left in the budget, Steve? I don't know, $6,000. Well, let's divide 1,000 people by $6,000. I guess everybody's getting calendars this year for $6. Like that's how most people are doing their decision making versus saying, what can we do that's really thoughtful and intentional on the front end or cut it out altogether and redirect the dollars towards something else.
And that's important. So that's the second part of my question. You did excellent and segueing right to that. So most of our clients, all of our clients are service providers, doctors, accountants, lawyers, gym owners, and maybe not in the event space, but in doing business, exactly what you were talking about, budget becomes a big concern. And so I want to remind everybody, you can go to giftologysystem.com, giftologysystem.com. There you can get the full outline of what John teaches to companies that he's been mentioning, to great companies that are doing really big things. But here's what happens is that the individual entrepreneur says, yeah, but I don't know how to determine my budget. So even though it's not a conference where I have $6,000 left over and I'm going to divide that amongst the attendees, really they're just thinking like, well, I look at my top line, my bottom line. I don't know how much money I should invest in gifting. Help us work through that thought process. How do I determine what is a reasonable investment in a gift? Yeah,
well, it's a fair question. It's a question that I think a lot of times, because of the industry that we're in, it feels like very like heart-centered and woo-woo. And it's like, John, are you just asking me to spend a bunch of this money and throw it out the window and like hope? And if you met my business partner, Rod, who owns 50% of everything I do, like he's the numbers guy. He worked at a top 100 accounting firm. And he's like, if we invest $1, we got to get $5 back out. Like, this isn't like, yeah, we want to be kind. Yeah, we want to be generous. Yeah, the Bible teaches that if you reap what you sow and that you pour into things, you get it back 100-fold. But you don't you can't cash checks of hope. Like as a business, we all need to be profitable. And so I learned early on that there needs to be a math equation. It needs to be numbers, like whether it's a tithe or whatever else, like there's real numbers to it. It's not just random things. And so for us, it's been a 5 to 15%, 5 at the low, 15 at the high. We have some people go up to 20. Reinvestment. This isn't an expense, a reinvestment back into your relationships. And so 10% is kind of mid-tier. I don't care what your top line is. People are like, John, we did, these mortgage companies. Hey, we did $20 billion last year. Great. What was your net profit? Because as a bootstrapped entrepreneur for 21 years, I wasn't raising private equity money or VC money or we weren't going into debt. We were reinvesting cash flow, of what we made. And so if somebody's say they're making 100 grand, that means they should be reinvesting 5, net, 100 grand net, 5 grand to 15 grand back into the relationships. And people are like, John, that's a lot of money. And I'm like, well, imagine if all your clients and centers of influence and employees went away. Like, how much would you make? And they're like, well, nothing. I'm like, exactly. You get to keep 85 grand at the low end. You're reinvesting the 15 grand, not as a woo-woo thing. It's reinvesting into those relationships so that the next year you make 120 grand. So that 15 grand just made you money within the first year. And we tell people this should be a thoughtful strategy. The same way you think about when you hire an extra 2 employees, you're not doing that as just an expense. You're doing that because you want to grow your company from 1.2 million to 1.5 or to 2. And so many people don't understand that this is a business strategy. This is an investment. This isn't a check the box once a year at Christmas as an expense, or we're having a conference, or we'll refer, we don't allow clients to give referral gifts. And the reason is because you don't get the return that you're looking for. You get a referral from somebody, you send them a $500 bottle of wine, you think you're doing a great thing. And the other person's thinking that person, is going to make 100 grand off that relationship. And they sent me a $500 bottle of wine. You just did a tit for tat versus if you invested in your relationships with that same $500 as a just because, now all of a sudden the person's like, I didn't do anything to deserve this. Why are they doing this? So when we're talking numbers, 5 to 15% reinvested back into the relationships to grow the relationship, hopefully you grow that person, to cross-sell and keep loyal. The secret sauce, though, of all of this is if you can turn your clients not into passively loyal clients where they sit on their hands and they stay as a client. I have one of my favorite clients and partners is a guy named Cameron Harold. We did this crazy Brooks Brothers experience for him 14 years ago when I met him. Dropped $7 grand on Brooks Brothers clothing, outfitted his hotel room. It's a long story. People are like, John, why would you spend $7 grand on one relationship? Well, I didn't spend $7 grand. I actually spent 25 grand over the course of a decade. I did the 7,000, and then I sent him $12,000 worth of knives. I sent him wine. I actually ran out of gifts to give him. And people are like, why did you keep giving him gifts when you already had him in your corner? And I'm like, when you show it for people because you want to, not because you have to, that's when people are inspired to go sell on your behalf. If I wanted to get Cameron Harold, who's written 5 books, coaches CEOs all over the world, as a sales rep, if I paid him $2 million, he would say no. He'd say, I don't have time for that. Because I loved on him, I inspired him to be a sales rep with no commission. And I did the math years ago. People are like, 25 grand, that's a lot. I'm like, it's produced multi-7 figures. So even at 7 figures, 25 grand to make $1 million, I'm just this farm kid. But to me, that's a 50x, what I call return on, I don't care what your ROI is. What's return on relationship? ROR will eat ROI all day long. Because when you pour into a relationship, there's no Facebook algorithm that's going to get a better return than pouring into people. Mm-hmm. And so when people talk about, man, 10% is a lot, 15% is a lot, I'm like, compared to what? Because you pour into people, look out. All of our businesses are the result of human beings going out of their way to open doors, advocate, refer business. It's all human beings, and yet we don't have a plan in a real math equation of how we're going to show up for those people. We just tend to be like, I don't know, it's December 15th. We made money this year. We probably should say thank you. And you end up sending bottles of wine and peanut brittle and stupid stuff out at the same time as all of your other competitors, and you wonder why nobody cares. It's because you're not investing as thoughtfully in that part of your business and relationship as you do any other part of your business.
Huge, huge. I remember a client, I was asking them, they did lunch meetings, and I said, you know, so you have to work to get the meeting. And I said, so what do you send them as a pre-gift? They were like, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, you had to work and they took the meeting.
Right.
And he was like, well, I don't send a pre-gift. I said, well, okay, well, let's say that you get the meeting and they agree to work with you. They're going to collaborate with you. What does that represent? They said $20,000 a month. I was like, wow, so $240,000 a year, and there's no pre-gift.
And you're taking them to lunch.
And then it gets better because and they're probably watching, and it's fine. I'm not going to say their name, but I said that then if you leave the meeting and you're pretty sure that this went well, and they represent now $240,000 to you a year, what do you send them then? And he said, I send them socks with their face on it. And, and I was like, $240,000. And he, like, wow. I just think that, man, like what you're saying is so true. And I'm
sure there's some cheesy note with it, like, hey, you blew our socks off, you blah, blah, blah. And people are like, oh, that's so cute. Hey, we did flip-flops and you were going to Mexico. And I'm like, do you realize, like, they're going to end up within a year in the trash. Like, you want to be green, stop giving crappy stuff that ends up in the landfill or at Goodwill. And people focus on the theme versus focus on the practicality and being world-class. And a lot of people will do the gift after the deal signed. And I'm like, somebody signs a $250,000 consulting agreement and you're like, oh, I'm Big Daddy Warbucks. I'm going to send a bottle of Dom and we're going to celebrate this. I'm like, really? Your $200, $250 bottle of champagne is 0.1% of the contract. Like, you think that's going to blow them away? Now, maybe it's like thoughtful and people are like, oh, that's cool. But nobody's going to be like, oh, I got to refer them to 5 of my friends because I got a bottle of Dom. But you start sending, like, I don't like consumables because it's like you send it, it's gone within 15 minutes. You get one impression. Like as an entrepreneur who's bootstrapping, I want my cost per impression to be super low. Do you give socks that maybe are worn once and then tossed, or a bottle of wine, drank once, forgotten about? The reason I love the knives and the different things that we do is because I could send, like we did it for Tony Robbins for a client. We sent him like an $8,000 knife set. People are like, Tony Robbins knives, like that's weird. And I'm like, well, every knife, all 40 knives were engraved with a quote of wisdom that Tony had spoken over 40 years. And it came in this $3,000 wood box that communicated value and future generations of Robbins, blah, blah, blah. That client now owns a piece of real estate, some of the most valuable real estate in the world on that person, on Tony's countertop. And every time he sees that knife set, and his wife Sage actually gushed about it, like most people aren't thinking strategically. They think, oh, that's cute, that's fun, I'll get logo on it. Oh, though I get the thank you. The goal isn't just to get the thank you. The goal is 3 years from now to have people still talking about the story and the thoughtfulness when you're not around. And that's what people like. I don't get referrals. Well, I don't understand. I do a great service. I'm like, everybody does. Like, you don't have great service or great product, you're out of business. That's table stakes. You want people to refer you business, you need to do things for them in such a way that's a story worth telling. At masterminds, at events, on the golf course, at the family dinner table, like you want to be in blow them away and have a story that's worth telling. And that's why people are like, John, I did this gift. Isn't that cute? And I'm like, I don't want cute. I want effective. I want 100x return on my investment. Yes, cute is cool. Like if you could be cute and practical and melt somebody's face off, awesome. But most people like, oh, they get into this marketing mindset and they hire an advertising firm to do their gifting, and cool, catchy words and marketing speak, who cares? At a core level, I need to hit somebody's heart, their spouse's heart, their kid's heart, their pet's hearts, their assistants' hearts. Like if you do those things, then you get the story worth telling and you get the return. It's not a cute thing. It's not a theme thing. It's an effective, thoughtful thing.
Yeah. Somebody did that for us, the Cutco knives with the quotes on them, the BDC, and it was unforgettable. That was through John. It was Dan McCoy. Dan McCoy did it, and it was just amazing. And you almost don't want to use it because it's such an impressive gift. But I have to ask, so I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking, who outside of you, because obviously you're really good at this, who would you consider really amazing gift givers? And then what's the best gift you ever sent? And what's the best gift you ever received?
Yeah. So what I would say is, yeah, there's other people that are amazing at this just naturally. I think whether it's, reading the Bible and realizing that Proverbs 18:16 says a gift ushers you before kings. Like a lot of the people that I know that are the best in the world at this realize that, like, from a faith perspective, like John Ruhlin and Giftology didn't invent this. This has been around for 5,000 years. I think just in our American Western culture, we say relationship driven, but really we're transactional driven. We say we're long game driven, but really we play the long game in days, not decades. So Joel Marion comes to mind. I don't know if you guys know Joel or not. He's got a company called BioTrust, 9-figure company. He is literally he's a client of ours, but even before I was engaging him and helping him outsource his relationship building and different things, he was doing these amazing, like he would send a Rolex, but it would be like in a special box with this crazy long letter with special engravings. And there was no ask. It was like literally like pastors that were doing amazing things, or a friend that's going through a rough time. Like, he would put so much thought and intentionality into the note and the packaging and the details and the personalization. And when I talked to him, we talked for 2 hours the first time. And then I was on his podcast. But I was like, I feel like I'm talking to myself. Like he was at such a level of understanding of how to develop these relationships and how to pour into people and how to budget accordingly and all of that. I mean, literally to the point where I was like, Joel, are you going to read Giftology? He's like, is there anything I can learn in it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Like, dude, you're already doing it. I would say my original mentor, Paul, who was the attorney, lived it. Like, a lot of what I teach, I learned watching him as this 20-year-old kid. It's just who he was. Like, he just showed up for people and was generous and kind and thoughtful and no strings attached, all of that. So I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people. I would say there's probably 2 gifts that come to mind that are some of the most thoughtful. And ironically, one I used to make fun of. People would be like, what's the worst gift in the world? I'm like, there's a lot. Gift cards are the worst. Food's the worst. Alcohol is the worst, all these things. But I was like, the corporate coffee mug is one of the worst. Like, it's probably $1 billion spent on these stupid things. People think they're cute because they put Hershey Kisses inside or M&Ms. I'm like, you can only drink out of 1 coffee cup. Most people's cupboards are just so much crap. And people buy them for like $10 from China with their logo on. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. And then this artist reads the book, listens to like 80 interviews, and reaches out to me. And it looks like he's 16. Christian dude reaches out and says, John, I want to help you bless your wife. Will you answer these 7 questions? I'm like, is this a stalker? Like, I don't even know this kid. So I answer the questions because I'm like, I'll play along. He's like, hey, the gift's done. I want to hand deliver it to you. I'm like, he wants FaceTime. He's using my playbook against me. I'm like, this is all right. So I'd make it a public place. This kid shows up. He looks like he's 16, carrying this Tupperware container. It looks like there's claw marks on the side. I'm like, is there an animal inside? Like, this is getting weird. And long story short is he pulls out these 2 $1,500 each mugs, artifact mugs. And the reason they're so much is carved into them over the course of 4 weeks was my life story, faith, family, kids, all like basically a lifetime achievement award carved into this piece. And then one for my wife, her on the farm with her dad who passed away of cancer, like all of these different elements of like your why, who you are. Pulls out 2 of these and then pulls out 2 of these like $5,000 vases. One is every Bible verse that talks about generosity or gifting. Wow. Handwritten all the way in, 50 lines deep. And then the other one is my wife and I's whole life story as a married couple. I'm like, dude, what is going on? I'm crying. I'm in a restaurant and like, this is weird. And I'm like, who are you? And he's like, I feel like God's called me to be this gift maker. So long story short is those artifact mugs are some of the most, I've literally have gifted them to billionaires and had billionaires in front of their entire, like YPO guys in front of their entire audience cry. Because we all want to be seen. We all want to be acknowledged. We all want our life to have mattered. Even a billionaire is like, do I have a legacy? Do people care about me? Do they just want me for my money? Like, so when you can honor somebody in such a way, when I got those, I started now like gifting them out. All my employees, I've given them to mentors, investors, advisors, clients. I've given out probably 140 of them personally. And I have mentors that have reached out and said, John, this is more valuable than my $40,000 watch. My watch is replaceable. I bought it for myself. It's cool. It's whatever. This mug, every time I use it, every day, I'm reminded of somebody cares about me. I'm reminded of my why, my faith, my family, the things that really matter to most human beings. So that to me is like one of those things. It's not the most expensive thing that somebody's ever sent me, but it's definitely one of the most thoughtful and one of the most impactful. And I literally use it every day.
It's amazing.
What about that you've sent? Best home run. Like you're like, I use my own playbook. Perfect.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, the Brooks Brothers was one for a long time that was like $7,000 of clothes in Cameron size. Most recently, within the last 12 months, I built a relationship with Jesse Itzler. We both spoke on the same stage. He became a big fan of Giftology, read the book, wanted to become a client, and was hanging out at his house. And I've been a part of EO for like 14 years, and they wanted to bring not just Jesse, who's an amazing speaker, like world class. They wanted Sarah Blakely, his wife, who started Spanx, who's a billionaire, down to earth, started the business with $5,000. Like she's just amazing, but she hates speaking, like literally hates speaking. So they're like, hey, could you help get Jesse and Sarah to come speak at this event? And so we started building a relationship over the last number of years, and they finally agreed just past May to speak, and it was going to be broadcast out to all 14,000 EO members. And so fortunately got to go hang out with Jesse, had dinner at their house with their 4 kids and Sarah. And I was like, this is kind of a once in a lifetime experience. Like this is like me getting to play Tony Robbins, because like Sarah doesn't speak very often. The last time she had spoken that I was aware of was Tony Robbins interviewing Sarah and Jesse at their like business mastery event. And I'm like, I want to do something to show Sarah that I really appreciate her being willing to do this, and to Jesse, and it's time out of they don't need to do this. And like, what do you give to billionaires? Like that's like a hard person to like. So I'm like, what do they care about? They care about their family, and they care about, Jesse cares about like his kind of legacy and history of where he got to start, which was being a white rapper. And Sarah, obviously Spanx is her baby. Like she is not taking outside investment. She's not sold it because she loves what she does. So I'm like, how can I honor their family? I know they love art. Most, people do. So I had this, it took a couple months, but I had this 7-foot tall piece of artwork made of them and their 4 kids, made of thousands of pieces of broken records and pieces of Spanx packaging. It's a $25,000 piece of artwork. It was incredible. And I was nervous because anytime you're doing something really bold, like there is possibility. Like I have done crazy gifts that backfire. Like if you do something 100 times, you have to expect 5 or 10% of them to not land the way that you wanted to. But in this case, at the end of the presentation, we're down in Atlanta, it's being broadcast. EO tried to talk me out of doing it because they're like, what if they don't like it? What if it goes sideways? And I'm like, it took 3 years to line up. We're doing this love bomb. I got it snuck into the hotel, the W, and we unveiled this piece. And to say their jaws hit the ground at the end of this interview is like an understatement. It was like one of the most incredible, like they got up, their tears in their eyes. They're like, how did you do this? I'm like, there's this female artist that we worked with who's like doing crazy stuff for like, she did this crazy piece for Kobe Bryant. She's like doing stuff now, being hired by celebrities and athletes all over the world to make these pieces of art. And they're like, we want to make a video for her. Can we say thank you to her? I want to know who she is. So I don't have the picture with me right now, but that love bomb, that piece of art that was 3D, was one of the coolest things in recent memory. And the response was over the top. And I believe, I haven't been back to their house, but they have a couple hundred pieces of artwork. And they literally told me, John, like we've had this place over our mantle near our kitchen. Like it's the main area in their house. We've been waiting for something like this to be able to put up into our house. This is perfect piece to honor our family and support this female artist. So that'd be at the top of the list.
Man, fantastic. I know we're up against the end of the hour here. Appreciate you spending this time with us, John. Looking forward to seeing you at summer camp. Anybody that's watching, you might be hearing this after summer camp, but www.cometosummercamp.com. We're going to have John unpacking this and more, giving you nuts and bolts, providing deep value. He's already done so much for the attendees. It's just going to be an absolute amazing time. Can't wait to spend some time with you. Like you said, the greatest gift I think that you can give us is your time. Super appreciate that. And we super appreciate being able to spend some time with you in person here in just a couple of days. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, everybody. We'll be back again next week with a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, review. Let us know how much you love this episode with John Ruhlin. We super appreciate it. That can be your gift to him.